Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just 1 minute. All right. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time, but I also want to allow time for people to jump in. Okay, great. Let's get started. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to have you here. Thank you for taking 30 minutes out of your day to talk about a very, very important topic. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, which is why we're doing this webinar. Stay tuned. We're going to be doing a webinar every month. But this is a good month to start this. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Mary Ellen Dance. I am actually a licensed mental health counselor by trade, and I am the director of corporate training at ENI. So I go on to companies and provide training, suicide prevention trainings, other types of trainings, all of the time. So if you're interested in any of those, reach out to me. But I'm really excited to be here to talk about suicide today. So we probably all know that suicide is a huge, huge issue. It is currently the 11th leading cause of death. 11th. It beats out a ton of other things as the cause of death. I believe that it I don't think it beats out heart disease, but it beats out like diabetes and a bunch of other medical conditions as a cause of death. In 2022, there were over 49,000 deaths by suicide. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention estimates close to 2 million suicide attempts per year. 2 million per year. So if you notice this slide says 46,000 lives were lost to suicide in 2020. That went up in 2022. It was 49,000. And that number, unfortunately, is just going up. So we need to do more. So that's why I'm really, really glad you're here. So I want to start by talking about some common misconceptions about suicide. It's really, really scary and uncomfortable to talk about suicide. And I think that is why people don't talk about suicide more, because it's uncomfortable and it may trigger someone, and we obviously don't want to trigger anyone. But I really want to talk about some of the things we might think are true about suicide that aren't necessarily true. The first thing is people who engage in self-injury are suicidal. What I mean by self-injury is like cutting, burning, things like that happen quite frequently. Oftentimes in the teenage population, that's really prevalent right now. That does not necessarily mean that someone is suicidal. It's actually, in the therapy world, it's called non-suicidal self-injury. Now, it's definitely something to be concerned about and something to talk about and something to get help with, but it's important to recognize that they are two different things. I see a lot of parents who maybe they catch their child self-harming, and that's devastating, absolutely devastating, and it's scary. However, that parent might assume that the child wants to die, and that might not be the case. So it's important to understand the difference, and it's okay to ask too. The second misconception I want to talk about is people who overdose do it intentionally. So I will note that the statistics that we have on suicide are up for debate just a little bit, because we don't know if overdoses are intentional or not. Sometimes they can be, sometimes they aren't. And so sometimes in terms of, we have to guess. And so there are unfortunately a lot of people who overdose accidentally without the intent to die. It's weird to think about suicide. That is not weird. It is part of being a human to have passing thoughts of, would I be better off dead? That does not necessarily mean anything bad. That is part of being a human. Here's what's happening though. Someone is having maybe a passive suicidal thought like that. They don't have a plan. They don't have an intent. It's just one of those human thoughts that we get sometimes. And someone else, they say it to someone, and the person they say it to responds by freaking out. Like, oh my gosh, don't kill yourself. What that does is it makes that person who's having that passive suicidal thought feel like they can't talk about it. I think it's important to normalize that sometimes we have weird thoughts that go through our head, and sometimes we have really nasty thoughts that go through our head. And it's not weird, it's not bad, it doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong. And it is okay to talk about. Actually, it is vitally important to talk about. Which brings me to my next misconception. Talking about suicide will make it worse. Talking about suicide will never, ever, 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 ever make it worse. Asking someone, are you thinking about killing yourself, does not put the idea in their head. I can assure you that idea has already been in their head. You are not going to put that idea in their head. What it will do is it might help that person feel comfortable saying, actually, yeah, I have thought about that. And is that weird? Is that normal? Is that bad? We're going to get to what to do if that happens, but I really want to normalize talking about suicide. We need to normalize it. We need to normalize that it's okay if we think about it. That happens. That's not weird. We do want to get help and support, so we don't think about it. But it's important to normalize. It is okay to ask straight out, have you thought that you would be better off dead? Have you thought about killing yourself? It is okay to ask those questions. The last misconception here is people who attempt suicide really want to die. Maybe some people. Oftentimes people who are elderly who attempt suicide do want to die. But a lot of people who attempt suicide do not want to die. They just want to stop the pain. And they think it is the only way to stop the pain. So I know what I'm about to say is going to sound bizarre, but there are a lot of people who attempt suicide who don't really think about death. They haven't really gotten that far in their heads. They're only thinking about ending the pain and how death is a solution to end the pain. They're not necessarily thinking, 10 years from now, I won't be here for X event or whatever it may be. They're just thinking about ending the pain. Now, again, that is not everyone, but I want to really have everyone understand that oftentimes it's not about death. It's about pain and wanting that pain to end. So if we're worried about someone Again, the number one thing we can do is ask. We can ask in a non-judgmental way. We can talk about suicide in a non-judgmental way. But some warning signs to be really, really aware of: increased substance use. That's obviously a big warning sign. Even if the person is not thinking about suicide, increased substance use is not great either. So we may want to talk to that person. If the person is engaging in really, really impulsive behaviors, that might be a sign that we want to talk to them. If the person is withdrawing socially, so they're isolating, they're not responding to people that they normally would respond to, they're not getting joy from things that they previously got joy from. If someone is like giving away their possessions, that might be a really, really big sign. If somebody is making hopeless statements, a really good rule of thumb is to see if somebody is future oriented. And what I mean by that, if someone is talking about, well, next month, this event is happening and I'm planning on going to it, versus, I don't know if I'm going to be around to see next month. Right? Those are two very, very different things, and we want to be aware of the latter if people are saying things like that. Also, if they're talking about suicide more, maybe they're making jokes about suicide, maybe they're asking questions about suicide. It's always a good idea to check in with that person if we're seeing some of these warning signs. Again, there are a lot of other warning signs, but these are some of the biggest ones. Okay, so when we do see those warning signs and we want to intervene, I want to talk to you about some things that we probably have said before with the best of intentions that aren't really helping. It'll be okay. We all say that with the best of intentions, but that person who is suicidal is thinking, no, it won't. They're thinking, no, it won't. That it'll be okay statement is going in one ear and out the other, right? But you have it so much better than other people. That might make the person just feel guilty, right? Like, okay, well, I guess I can't talk about how I'm feeling because I should be grateful I have it better than other people, right? That might actually shut the person down. So we don't want to say things like that. We never ever want to say you're being dramatic, it's all in your head. We always want to take threats of suicide seriously. And saying don't commit suicide, what that does is that can kind of like trigger some of those guilt feelings. It can again make that person just not want to talk about it because they feel like they might just be shut down by you saying don't commit suicide. Some things to say is we always want to refer to people who die by suicide as die by suicide. Saying commit has this very like negative connotation, right? And so we want to say die by suicide. But like I've mentioned before, we can always ask, are you thinking about suicide? We always want to ask if there's a plan, right? Because there's a big difference between someone saying like, yeah, I've thought about would I be better off dead, and someone saying, yeah, I have a bottle of pills I've stashed away. Big, big difference. So we always want to ask if there's a plan. Letting the person know that you're here for them, that they can call you, that they can reach out to you, letting them know you're here. And telling them things like, you're important to me. I'm glad you're alive. You've added so much to my life. You've benefited my life. I'm so glad you're in my life. Those things make a huge difference. Oftentimes, people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts might feel really alone. And it's okay to call that out. It's okay to say, I don't really know exactly how you're feeling. But there are people out there who do know how you're feeling. And even though I don't really know exactly how you're feeling, I want to support you. I want to be there for you. I love you. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're alive. Those simple things can be the difference between life and death. It's also important, obviously, to get support. People who are having suicidal thoughts might roll their eyes if you tell them to, text talk to 741-741 or call the crisis line 988. They might roll their eyes, but we can never, ever, ever say that enough. We can always give people resources. I believe that people have to hear about a resource at least 7 times before they use it. So we always want to provide people with the resources. We always want to remind the person that there is help out there, that there is hope out there, and that you want them to be alive and you want them to feel better. And so obviously always encouraging this, because as much as we want to support people, we are not professionals, and we want to make sure that the person gets professional support as well as our personal support. So I know that was a very brief overview, but hopefully these little nuggets of information will help you a little bit, and help you to think about suicide a little bit differently, and hopefully maybe talk about it a little bit differently. Again, stay tuned. I will be doing a short little webinar like this every month, which I'm really excited about, on a different topic every month. And if you think your staff would benefit from a training about suicide prevention or really anything else, please contact me at the email address that is on the slide. I would love to hear from you. And thank you for wanting to be a part of the solution and wanting to normalize suicide and help suicide and support anyone who's thinking about suicide. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you next month.